Welcome to another episode of the Loadout Music Podcast, featuring in-depth interviews with a wide range of music personalities, from rock and roll Hall of Famers to Grammy winners and today's rising stars. Recorded from the Old Rock House in St. Louis, Missouri, here's your host, Aaron Perlut.
Welcome back to the Loadout Music Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Perlut, and today we're joined by singer-songwriter Joshua Radin, whose work first drew attention on the show Scrubs. He's since tallied more than 1 billion streams. His single, I'd Rather Be With You, was certified gold. His music has appeared in over 200 films, television series, and commercials. And Ellen Degeneres loves him so much that he played at her wedding. Oh, and he has a new single out with an album to follow. Welcome, Joshua. Appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
So I understand that growing up you grew up in Ohio, and music really wasn't your jam growing up, right? You were not, that was not what you saw as a career pathway or even something that you were fluent in, for lack of a better term.
No, I didn't grow up playing any instruments or anything like that. I just grew up as a fan of music.
What was it that started? I know that there was a point where your father gave you a guitar. I think you had moved to New York, but was there kind of like a subtle pull, or were you just kind of you went to shows, you dug music, and it wasn't even a thought beyond that?
Yeah, there was never a thought beyond it. I guess the older I would get, the more I would think like, well, who just, buys a guitar and starts, I just always thought it was way too late. Like everyone I knew that played music had been playing since they were a little kid. And so it never even seemed like a reality to me at all. So when I was about to turn 30 years old, I bought a guitar when I was writing screenplays living in New York, and I was just really, I bought a guitar more as a meditative device. It was like I'd be writing screenplays, and I'd be sitting in the coffee shop down below my apartment, and I couldn't figure out where the next scene would go, or what a character was about to say, and I found it easier to pick up a guitar and sort of strum away and learn a new chord or something and get my mind off of it. And it would open up some other pathway in my brain. And that was sort of a way I would do other creative work. And very quickly, after learning a few cover songs, just for fun, just sit around and sing in my living room, I decided, I'm a writer. Maybe I should. Now I know a few chords on the guitar. Maybe I could try to write my own song, and I did. And then about like a month after recording a demo of it, it was on a TV show like the one you mentioned, Scrubs. And then it was sort of shocking. At the time, Scrubs was on NBC, and the next day after that episode aired, it was a song called Winter that I had written. It was the first song I had ever written. And the producers of the show called me and told me that the NBC website, not just Scrubs website, but the NBC website had crashed from people trying to figure out, writing and searching, where could they find that song? Because it was in a really poignant moment in a very silly comedy, but it was a sad song, and it was at a funeral. And so I think it hit people, the fans of the show, harder than a lot of songs had hit them on that series before. So, it was kind of then that my family and friends were sort of like, "Hey, that was a pretty cool thing that just happened. Have you thought about writing any more songs? Maybe this could happen again. Maybe lightning would strike twice." And so I still thought, no, that's probably not a something I could really do, but professionally. But I gave it a shot, and I moved out to LA after writing a few songs, and the rest is history.
So I did something very similar, whereas I didn't start writing music and even learning to play guitar until I was in my mid-40s, and I come from a writing background as well, in journalism, and then marketing. And I'm curious, I found it because of my background in writing and, I'd been a contributor with Forbes and ESPN.com. I found lyric writing to be not that challenging. I was able to kind of take my thoughts and transfer them in that way. But for me, it was more the composition that was challenging those first couple of years. Did you have a similar track, or were you able to adapt with the composition quickly?
I know, I felt the same way. It was like I had all these things I wanted to say, but every time I'd pick up the guitar, I was very limited. And then it just came down to figuring out a way to sit around with the guitar on the couch and just strum away different chord progressions and finding different melodies. And then it got easier and easier.
Did you find yourself, because at that point early on, you were still a novice from the composition end, putting together unique chord structures that maybe someone who was schooled in music theory would not have done, but it actually became a benefit to you because the combination of different chords became a little unique for in terms of what again someone with a music theory background would have?
I think I kept it simple because that was the only way I could. I think someone with a music theory background might be thinking, well, this is too simple of a chord progression. And they'd want to complicate something to overcomplicate it because of the studying they had done. And for me, it was more like it wasn't necessarily the chord progressions; it was the melodies I was finding within them. And if I was singing a melody, just kind of coming up with a song, strumming away, and I liked it, and I wanted to sing it again, I felt like that's a melody I want to use.
Yeah, well, Tom Petty used to say that if you're using more than 3 chords in a song, you're just showing off. So
I think Tom Petty also used to said, "You don't get paid for the fourth chord," something like that.
yeah. So,
I think one of my other favorites of his was "Don't bore us, get to the chorus."
Everybody loves the hook, man. People they're like, wait, I'm gonna wait and see what the hook's like, even if I don't like this. Where did you, as you started writing music, what did you find became, looking back on your musical interests in terms of the people that you had listened to growing up, who became, like, when I think about people that inspire me, Tom Petty's one of them, Ray Wylie Hubbard's another one. Who started inspiring you? You're like, wow, if I could figure out a way to write songs like this guy or like this woman or what have you.
I guess I mean, I grew up as a Beatle maniac, so there's a lot of John Lennon songs that melodically and lyrically hit me hard as a kid. And then in college, I would say I listened to Dylan more than anything. And then after college, I would say there was a lot of Elliott Smith, Nick Drake, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young. I was always really drawn to just like a solo artist with a guitar, who wrote great lyrics, wrote great melodies, and could sing their ass off too. And someone who could just sit there with a guitar and play you a song that they wrote, and it just would hit me viscerally. And if it didn't do that, I was never really that into. I like all kinds of music and all kinds of artists, but that's the kind of artist that really got me off.
It's funny you mentioned Elliott Smith, because when I first started listening to your music, that was the first, human beings can't help but make a parallel when they listen to music. And that was the first parallel that I drew when I started listening to yours was the late Elliott Smith, who
He was so great.
Yeah, and he had such a he was actually career-wise in a great place before, unfortunately, he ended up taking his life, but because he had been in that Good Will Hunting movie, his music had been featured in the Good Will Hunting movie, and he'd become very, very popular. But yeah, and he was
but he had some demons personally, but he was an incredible guitar player and lyricist and melody maker, and he just had a really unique sound that I gravitated toward, like a lot of people did.
He definitely
and
did.
I think I you like you said, you can hear a lot of his influence in my first album for sure.
Yeah. So I'm curious about something. I know that, recently you kind of like, you've put out nearly 10 albums. You've done really well over the past decade or so with your career. You had that progressive growth in your career, but you just decided that you needed to kind of like drop out of, I don't want to say life necessarily, but you kind of left everything behind and said, I'm leaving the country. I'm going to go travel on with very minimal um, uh, possessions, and explain what that's all about, because it seems like, a real soul searching exercise.
I think, yeah, like it's the opposite of giving up on life. It's almost like I felt like I was going to embrace it and going to live rather than sitting in my house all the time in Los Angeles and um, you know finding different ways to entertain myself. And instead, I was like, I always love to travel, but I think it's also after 18 years on tour, starting so late in life, like starting when I was 30, 31, touring, um, you have to really get used to being in a different place all the time. That's something you have to uh, acclimate to, and it takes a minute. And then when I finally did, it was really hard to stay in one place because my soul, my brain, my heart, everything about me was um, had gotten used to uh, traveling, waking up in a new town, craving uh, constantly, constantly craving new experiences, and 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 needing more stimulation than probably most people do, rather than like a typical day to day go to a job or um, kind of certain routines that people fall into, and a lot of people require, for their sanity. I guess my sanity required the opposite, and so when the pandemic hit and I was locked away in my house in LA forever, not seeing anyone, it was so lonely, and all I wanted to do was travel so much. It was what I would daydream about all the time. So finally, when the world opened up, I was like, you know, I don't all that stuff I was sitting around in my house looking at material possessions. I was like, none of this is making me happy at all. Like, I don't need any of this. So I gave a lot away. Put a lot of stuff in storage, the meaningful things. Um, Sold my house, and yeah, I've been traveling for about a year and a half now with a suitcase and a guitar, and making songs wherever I want to make them. Meeting people and be like, hey, let's make a song, or um, and just Airbnb, hoteling, um, and whenever I get bored with a place, or I'm like, I'm gonna head out and spontaneously travel. So like right now I'm in Stockholm. I have a lot of friends here. I've been coming here for many, many years, and I love making music here with a few different producers. And um, but I've been coming here for so long. I had a Swedish ex-girlfriend, and used to spend a lot of time here and made a lot of friends. And I love the lifestyle here when the sun's out. I'm not a big fan of the winters here, but and I don't spend the winters here, but um, like I was here all last summer, and then I'll go on tour in the fall in the States, and then I'll go chase the sun for a while. Um, anything to keep me inspired and keep me writing and keep me curious, meeting new people, seeing new places. And I love the Mediterranean in July. It's like my favorite place to be in July. And everyone's like, well, where are you going? I'm like, I don't even have a plane ticket yet. I mean, it's so easy here in Europe to just go to the airport and buy like $100 ticket down somewhere in the Mediterranean and then just pop around. Um, Whereas when I was living in LA, you had to book your tickets way out in advance to save a little bit of money, or by the time you got to Europe and the Mediterranean, you'd be like a week of jet lag. And just this is just so easy to be able to travel around Europe and see different cultures and eat different foods and hear different languages, and you can do it in an hour or two.
It reminds me a little bit of my ADHD brain, in that I feel like I've always got to be doing something new. But it sounds like you're finding a lot of cultural and musical inspiration and fulfillment as you kind of move along the way, and it helps it helps you as you in your songwriting and just in terms of being personally fulfilled and finding new things and new people.
Yeah. I mean, the older I get, the more my friends are having kids, and it's like I see it's really hard for them to stay curious. Their entire life, in a lot of cases, becomes this family they're creating, and that's totally understandable. And I'd like to do that too, but until I do, um, I want to be around people that are doing crazy things. And I think that's this album that I've been making that is almost all out. 7 of the 10 songs are out now. I've been releasing them like a song every 6 weeks. It's called Though the World Will Tell Me So. And I think it was one of those things I was thinking about a lot was, the society and the world is always telling us this is at this age you have a kid, this is how you live, this is how you eat, this is how you travel, this is how you release music, this is how you write music. And whatever it came down to, I was always that person asking why. And so I wrote this album about that. I would say that's the current that runs throughout all 10 songs, is almost a rebellion in a way of why do I have to do things this way because it works out for a lot of other people. Maybe I'll find my own path. When I sold my house a year and a half ago, all my friends and family were like, "What? We love that house. What are you doing? Like you're living like it's like you just graduated high school and you're taking a gap year before university or something and just traveling around with a backpack, and aren't you a little old for this?" And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's one thing that I found really interesting is you talked a little bit about I don't know if fear is the right word. And you might have been speaking specifically about the song Man of the Year. But you were talking about being scared. Um, and could you touch on that a little bit? I thought it was kind of an interesting way to frame your mindset. Was it the song or was it the record that you were finding these things that gave you fear or to be scared about?
I think fear is the prime motivator for all human beings. And I've had a lot of fear in my life, and it continues to grow the older I get. And I think usually when I write songs, it's based on a certain fear. It's usually a fear of telling someone how I really feel, or myself how I really feel if I'm looking in the mirror and dissecting my own self. And songwriting is sort of how I break through that fear. Like if I have I've always had a bit of a fear of intimacy in my personal life, letting my guard down, letting people in, trusting people. And so songwriting is how I tend to connect with the world. Letting people in. Or sometimes I have an ex that maybe I was afraid to get too close to, and like in this song Man of the Year, that's what that's about. It's reminding myself that there's a woman out there that I had been afraid to let her break all my walls down, and I wasn't able to make myself as vulnerable as I needed to make the relationship work. So I imagined myself writing this song, and if I gave it kind of an old Tom Petty kind of feel of like maybe like a more of a radio song than an Elliott Smith type of song, then I imagined it might get on the radio, and through the radio waves, that was the letter I was writing her, and that's how she would hear it. But yeah, I think all art, no matter what you do when you're creating, is sort of, if it's good, and when I say if it's good, it doesn't necessarily mean if other people like it. I just mean if it's good I mean, it's like an exercise in each artist's mind, meaning like the success of that art for me means that I broke through some sort of barrier that regarding fear.
I did notice, I don't want to get away from the point of fear because I think it's an important one, but I did notice that musically, it did have a contrast to a lot of the music you write, in that it was definitely more of a rock and roll song. I mean, as soon as I turned, because I listened to the majority of your catalog, and I flipped it on, and I'm like, Man of the Year stands out. So I'm glad you.
Well, thank you. I had to, like I said, I when I wrote it, it wasn't that way, and then when I went into the studio, I said to this producer, I was like, let's try to make this song sound a bit more like an old Tom Petty song, and something that would maybe be on Full Moon Fever, like one of my favorite albums, and not exactly like that, but that influence. And a lot of times when you're going into the studio, you've got a song that sounds very different when you've written it on the guitar on the couch, and then there's all these ways you can go about recording a song. It can go so many different ways, and you have to decide, okay, what's inspiring me right now? Where do I think we should go with this, instrumentally, vibe wise, beat wise? And that was my first instinct to think like, this could be let's try to make this sound like it's like it was from that influence, from that album.
So let me ask you this: struggling with intimacy and closeness, and being a kind of a solo singer-songwriter, you're traveling around, you're working with different producers in different countries, you're recording different things. When you find yourself in the studio setting, I don't know about you, but when I write music, I come in, I've got the song written from me as the rhythm guitarist and the vocalist, but then I give it to the rest of the band, and I'll play it twice through for them, and then all of a sudden they might just jump in and start working on parts. And how do you?
That's how it's happened for me many times in the studio. Sometimes the producer will say, well, what about this vibe? Or sometimes I'll be playing it for a band, or sometimes I'll be playing it for no one. Sometimes I'll just record the guitar to like a click track, and I'll do my vocals, and then I've got my vocals down, and then you can kind of send around that sort of track with the click to musicians from all over the world if you want, and just say, hey, could you add a little piano here? Could you do this? And sort of build a track that way. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. So, and I've tried so many different ways. Always just trying to stay curious. Like it gets boring to me if I try something the same way. I always trying to figure out, is there a better way to do this, or a more natural way for me? Same with touring in general. It's not just recording. A lot of times I'll be touring, and I'll call my manager and say, I think it'd be better actually if I got 2 days off between a town, so I don't burn out, and I really enjoy being on tour rather than tiring myself out. Or there's so many little things that I always trying to, like, the next time around, do it better, or do it, like I said, a more natural fit for me.
There's a real, I'm sure you feel this too. There's a real trust factor. There needs to be a trust factor when you're giving your music to other musicians and you're asking them to add a complementary piece. And you mentioned you struggle with that. So how do you get beyond that in this process? Because your music is so personal to you and how you feel so deep inside. That must be a really hard hurdle for you each time you try to collaborate.
It is, but then you've also got your people that you've worked with a bunch, and you kind of trust, and they know what you've liked before that they've tried. You get to know people better and better. Like, that's what a band is. Not that I have a band, but like a certain band of rotating cast of characters over the years, that if I need bass, I don't play bass, so I can send it to a few different guys and be like, I'm hearing kind of this, and then it's always better or a bit easier and quicker to tell someone, here are some reference points. But yeah, I mean, I think the more and more I work with people, the more and more you get to know their sensibilities and they get to know yours. And um, then it makes quick work of it usually.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've got two producers that we've worked with, and one guy in LA who has mixed two records for us, and he just gets us. He gets our style. He gets
Yeah.
the instrumentation. He just gets us, and I know that I can trust him with it. But we've gone through two projects with him, so we're kind of through that part of the trust factor. But I know I can
Yeah.
leave it in his hands.
Yeah, exactly. I've got that with people too. And then certain times I'm like, whoa, I wonder what it's like to work with. Every time I work with someone new, I kind of learn something new about the way they
Yeah.
do it. So I don't like to work with the same people over and over again. I don't like that safety.
Does
It
does
keeps me
it
it keeps me from growing and learning.
does that at first make you a little nervous? You're like, my guy before didn't do it that way. And then once you see
Yeah.
the final product, you're like, oh, okay, it's all right.
No, sometimes it fails. Sometimes not fails, but sometimes I just don't like what they're doing with it, and that's fine. But then you work on it and you get there, or you don't. Then you move on to someone else. I mean, there's no right way to do anything, I don't think.
Yeah. So I've a good most of our guests I've actually seen live. I've never seen you play live. So what's the live experience like? Is it I've always been amazed.
Totally different.
It
Totally different each time.
Yeah.
It's very different if I'm playing with a band and sometimes I'm playing solo. They're two different animals. The playing with a band is I mean, the playing with solo is just so incredibly intimate. And I talk a lot, and I try to make it like my living room, for an audience. I try to play smaller venues that I can, uh, you know, make it feel like we're all in it together. And when they leave, that they've known me, that they know me a lot better as a person, not just as a musician.
Kind of like the intimacy of, say, a like house concert, where
Yeah,
you're having this kind of
exactly.
continuum of a conversation.
Exactly. And sometimes someone shouts out something and we get another dialogue, or, I mean, um, and that way I don't do set lists. I just kind of play what I feel. And that way it just doesn't get boring for me night after night after night. Um, every night is completely different because the show is the audience is part of the show.
Yeah. And I guess when you've got as much material as you do to draw on, you're able to do that, and you can just kind of go with intuitively what
Yeah,
meets the mood, the setting, the instrumentation you've got that day.
exactly. And my problem is always, how do I get to I'll be thinking about certain songs. How do I get to that one? I don't have enough time. How do I get to that one? Because, you know, it's not like I'm going to play it solo for like 3 hours. Um, you want to leave people wanting more. It's like the first rule of entertainment. Um, I mean, if I have had like Bruce Springsteen hits, I mean, that guy can play for like 3 hours because everyone there is like just standing there like, yep, please don't ever stop. But I'm not on that kind of level. So um but it's interesting, my canon, I guess, of songs, it's sort of, um there's no one hit, there's no one like we're waiting around to hear this song. Everyone in the audience kind of generally has a different song that they want to hear, so I'm always trying to figure out, this audience, what do they want to hear more, or how do I get to this one? I want people to hear what they want to hear.
So I know you've got a lot of road dates that are set up. Are you
In the
going to
fall.
Yeah, so
In the
with
fall in the States.
with the new record, so you'll be back in the States, and it looked like you're really kind of I saw East Coast, I saw mountain, like Colorado, I saw West Coast. You're trying to really get around the US, not just go like region by region.
No. I always do a US tour. I do it. Takes at least like 6 weeks. And I hit like I generally hit all parts of the country, I guess. You can never hit everywhere, but at least if you're somewhere close, if there's like a super fan that wants to drive a few hours, they're at least they're only a few hours away rather than getting on a flight.
So what's the, you've accomplished a lot since you kind of not stumbled into it, but just decided this was
Well, I did stumble into it.
yeah.
That's exactly what I did.
But I mean, you've accomplished a lot. You've been on the Tonight Show. I mentioned Ellen before. You've played with people like Sheryl Crow and Ed Sheeran, and when you say, God, there's something I haven't quite done yet, or is it just that I like the path that I'm on? I like just kind of finding my way. Is it more? Because you seem like you're an explorer, and as you explore, the art comes from that exploration.
Yeah, I just constantly searching for a muse. And right now I'm releasing music and about to tour in the fall, but this summer is sort of like I need a new muse, and I think that's where my brain is at right now, like that sort of seeking. And then
Right.
I know a bunch of I know a bunch of other material will come after that.
And
But right now I'm just kind of like filling up the well.
have you felt like any regrets from selling the house, putting stuff in storage, and moving on, or have you gotten
No,
exactly what you thought you'd get out of it?
well, I don't know if I've gotten exactly. I didn't know what I'd get out of it, but I will, and I wouldn't want to know, because that's the whole point of like staying curious and having new experiences. But I will say that there's not one part of my material existence that I left behind that I've missed. I've missed certain people, back in LA, certain family members I haven't seen as much in the last year and a half, and certain friends, but there hasn't been one object or one article of clothing or something like I have one guitar with me for a year and a half. I haven't missed one of my guitars. Just in fact, even with my suitcase, there's certain things I look around and I'm like, well, I haven't worn that in 6 months. Like, what am I doing carrying that around? Like, make more room, because I can't really buy anything. Like I can't. You got to be able to carry it around. And if my suitcase is full, I need winter clothes, summer clothes. Like I've got some music gear in there. I've got like a laptop and a mic, and when I play live shows, so I've got a little gear in there. So there's a lot of stuff in there. It's not just clothes. But I'm kind of a t-shirt and jeans kind of guy anyway. So you need like a pair of running shoes, a pair of sandals, a pair of boots, and it's the winter coat and the big sweater that takes up a lot of room. That's for sure. I'm always on the lookout for the best pair of running shoes, because if you only have room for one pair of sneakers, like you got to be able to run in them and also walk around in them. So you want to be like, it's hard to find a pair of running shoes that you also think look cool to wear out at night.
Yeah, you got to be efficient. You have to be an efficient player.
It's super efficiency. And it's funny, like I still have stuff in there, like I said, that I haven't worn in forever. And I'm just like, I give it away.
Well, Joshua Radin, thank you so much for being on the Loadout Music Podcast.
My pleasure. Good talking to you.
Yeah, man. I believe the website is at joshuaradin.com.
You got it.
Look you up.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you so much. It's been a real joy having you on. I appreciate you.
So nice to meet you, Aaron. Appreciate you, man. Take care.